Welcome to Revenge Coven, where betrayal meets its match and karma casts the final spell. Join our coven for weekly stories packed with shocking twists, emotional intensity, and the satisfying thrill of revenge done right. Thank you. The kitchen clock read 11:47 p.m. when I heard his footsteps behind me. I'd come down for water, nothing more. The house was supposed to be asleep. "Olivia," Warren said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "We should talk." My stomach tightened. Something in his voice felt wrong, too gentle, too deliberate. He moved closer, blocking my path to the stairs. "About what?" I kept my voice steady, gripping my glass. "You're special, you know that?" His hand reached toward my shoulder. "I've always noticed how mature you are. How different from your mother." I stepped back. "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. His expression shifted, not embarrassment, not apology. Something colder. Calculating. "I see," he said quietly. "That's disappointing." He left without another word. I stood there shaking, trying to process what just happened. At 22, I'd lived in this house for 3 years since Mom married him. I'd always felt uneasy around Warren, but tonight confirmed why. 2 hours later, red and blue lights flooded through my bedroom window. I heard pounding on the front door, then Mom's confused voice downstairs. Then I heard my name, and the word theft. My entire world shattered in that moment. The police station smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. I sat in a cold metal chair, still wearing my pajamas, while Detective Phillips asked me the same questions repeatedly. "Where were you between 8 and 10 p.m. tonight?" "In my room. Studying for my certification exam." "Can anyone verify that?" "No. I was alone." Warren had reported $500 missing from his wallet. He claimed he'd seen me near his bedroom earlier that evening, acting suspiciously. The timeline he gave police painted me as a desperate, troubled young woman. Mom sat beside him in the waiting area, her face pale and confused. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," I told the detective. "I didn't take anything." "Your stepfather seems quite certain." They released me at dawn with a warning. No charges yet, pending investigation. But the damage was already done. Warren had called relatives during the night, his voice breaking with manufactured grief, explaining how betrayed he felt. How he tried to help me, support me, and this was how I repaid his kindness. By morning, my phone exploded with messages. "How could you do this to him? After everything they've done for you. You need help, Olivia. Seriously." When I reached our driveway, Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Warren stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his face the picture of wounded dignity. "You can't stay here," Mom said. "Not after this." I returned to pack my belongings under Mom's watchful supervision. She stood in my doorway like a guard, making sure I didn't take anything else. Every drawer I opened felt like an accusation. Every item I packed was examined with suspicion. Warren stayed downstairs, giving us space, or so it seemed. But I felt his presence everywhere. The house that had never quite felt like home now felt actively hostile. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with their silent judgment. I packed quickly, mechanically. Clothes, laptop, documents, photos. The essential pieces of a life I'd built here, now reduced to 3 cardboard boxes. As I carried the last box to my car, I heard Warren's voice drifting from the kitchen. He was on the phone, speaking in that same soft, reasonable tone he'd used last night. "Won't be a problem anymore. Trust me, I've handled it. She'll be too busy defending herself to cause trouble." I froze, my hand on the car door. Those words echoed with a deeper meaning, a confirmation of something darker than simple theft accusations. Mom appeared beside me. "You should go now." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream the truth. But looking at her face, closed, decided, loyal to him, I knew she wouldn't believe me. Not yet. I crashed on my friend Bethany's couch that first week, my reputation in ruins. People I'd known for years crossed the street to avoid me. Former friends stopped responding to messages. The whispers followed me everywhere. Then Warren escalated. An email arrived at my workplace, Silver Creek Marketing, where I'd worked for 2 years. It came from an anonymous account but was clearly from him. The message suggested I was experiencing mental health difficulties and might be unstable in professional settings. My supervisor, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office that Friday. His expression was careful, neutral, but I could see the concern beneath it. "Olivia, I need to ask you about some concerning information we received." My throat tightened. "What information?" "A message suggesting you're dealing with personal issues that might affect your work performance. Theft accusations. Family conflicts." He paused. "Is there something you need to tell me?" "It's not true. Any of it." My voice cracked. "Someone is trying to sabotage me." "I want to believe you," he said slowly. "But I need you to understand that we have to take these matters seriously. Consider this a verbal warning. If there are any further incidents or concerns raised about your behavior, we'll need to discuss your continued employment." I left his office trembling. Warren wasn't just destroying my home life. He was systematically dismantling everything I'd built. My job, my reputation, my future. All because I'd rejected him. That night, I barely slept, wondering what he'd destroy next. Sleep became impossible. I replayed that kitchen encounter endlessly, searching for something I'd missed. Warren's words, his expression, the deliberate way he'd positioned himself. The calculation in his eyes when I refused him. Then I remembered something small. His phone. It had been sitting on the counter, screen facing up. I'd noticed it because the screen was on, recording something. At the time, I'd been too shocked to process it. But now, lying awake at 3 a.m. on Bethany's couch, the detail crystallized. Warren had been recording our conversation. But why would he record his own inappropriate advance? Unless he'd planned to edit it, to use it somehow against me if I spoke up. Or maybe he'd been recording himself all evening, building an alibi for whatever he was planning. My heart raced. If that recording existed, if I could find it, it might prove he'd lied about the timeline. It might show he'd initiated that conversation, contradicting his victim narrative. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the cloud storage account Warren and Mom shared. I still had the password from when I'd helped Mom set it up last year. My hands shook as I scrolled through folders. Documents, photos, random files. Then I found it, a folder labeled voice memos with files dated from that night. I held my breath and downloaded everything. But when I opened the files, my hope dimmed. The audio was fragmented, partial. It captured voices but not clear words. Enough to prove he'd been recording, but not enough to prove what he'd done. Still, it was something. It was a crack in his story. I spent 3 days analyzing that audio file, running it through enhancement software, trying to extract something usable. The quality was poor, muffled, broken, but certain elements were clear enough. Timestamps. His voice initiating conversation. Long pauses where I must have been responding. Then his tone changing. It wasn't a smoking gun. No court would convict based on this. But it proved one crucial thing. Warren had lied about the timeline he'd given police. He'd claimed he was in his bedroom all evening, that he'd only gone downstairs briefly at 10 p.m. and noticed me acting suspicious near his room. This audio proved he'd been in the kitchen at 11:47 p.m., engaged in a conversation he'd initiated. The theft he reported supposedly occurred between 8 and 10 p.m. Yet here he was downstairs, talking to me almost 2 hours after his alleged discovery. I saved copies everywhere, external drives, email drafts, cloud storage. This was evidence, even if incomplete. This was truth, even if partial. But I knew it wasn't enough yet. Warren had years of credibility, a respected position in the community, and my mother's complete trust. I had a damaged recording and a ruined reputation. I needed more than truth. I needed proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. That night, I made a list of everyone who'd known Warren longer than Mom had. Everyone who might have seen behind his mask. I was done being defensive. It was time to investigate. The message came from my cousin Sophie, someone I barely knew. We'd met maybe 3 times at family gatherings. She lived 2 states away now. I heard what happened, her message read. I'm so sorry. I wish I'd warned you. My fingers trembled as I typed back, warned me about what? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, can we talk? Not in writing. We spoke on the phone that night. Sophie's voice was quiet, careful, like she was speaking a dangerous secret into existence. It was 7 years ago. I was 19, visiting for Thanksgiving before he married your mom. He cornered me in the garage, said inappropriate things. When I rejected him, he got angry. Not loud, quiet angry, which was scarier. Did you tell anyone? I told my parents. They confronted Uncle Timothy, Warren's brother. The family decided to handle it quietly. Warren apologized, said he'd been drinking, that I'd misunderstood. Everyone wanted to believe him because believing me meant admitting something ugly about someone they respected. My chest tightened. They buried it. They buried it, she confirmed. And I was asked not to bring it up again. For family peace. Sophie, would you be willing to tell this story if I needed you to? Silence stretched between us. Then, if it helps protect someone else from him, yes. I'll tell it. I had my second piece. A pattern. A witness. Proof that I wasn't the first. I started digging into Warren's life with careful determination. Public records, social media, mutual connections. What I discovered was a carefully constructed facade with cracks showing underneath. Warren Fletcher, respected insurance executive, volunteer coach, devoted husband. That was the public image. But the reality was different. 3 years ago, he'd declared bankruptcy, though few people knew. He'd been quietly borrowing money from family members, always with reasonable explanations. Medical expenses. Investment opportunities. Temporary cash flow issues. He'd left his previous job under unclear circumstances, officially a career change, but I found a former colleague on LinkedIn who hinted at inappropriate workplace behavior that led to a quiet resignation. The theft accusation suddenly made horrifying sense. He'd needed money and needed a scapegoat. When I rejected his advances, I became both the problem and the solution. Accuse me of theft, destroy my credibility, ensure I'd be too defensive to reveal what he'd done. If I tried to tell the truth about that kitchen encounter, I'd be dismissed as a liar desperately trying to deflect from my own crimes. It was calculated, deliberate, cruel. He'd weaponized the legal system and family trust against me, knowing I was young, vulnerable, without resources to fight back. But he'd made one mistake. He'd assumed I'd stay silent. That I'd accept defeat. That was changing. Warren's lawyer sent the letter on a Tuesday. A formal notification that my stepfather was seeking a restraining order, claiming I'd been harassing and threatening him. The allegations were complete fiction. I hadn't contacted him once since moving out. But the legal document made it real, made it scary. It claimed I'd been driving past the house, sending threatening messages through fake accounts, attempting to damage his reputation. All lies. But lies wrapped in legal language, filed in official systems. The same day, Mom sent a single text, "Please stop this. You're only hurting yourself. We won't be responding to any further contact from you." I read it 3 times, searching for any hint that she doubted him, any crack in her certainty. Nothing. Warren was boxing me in legally and socially. The restraining order would create an official record of me as unstable, threatening. It would make everything I said seem like the ravings of someone unhinged. I sat in Bethany's apartment, that legal document in my hands, feeling the walls close in. My job was hanging by a thread. My family had disowned me. My name was ruined. And now I was being legally labeled as dangerous. For the first time since this began, I felt truly defeated. But defeat has a strange quality. When you reach absolute bottom, when there's nothing left to lose, a kind of clarity emerges. Warren's power depended entirely on my silence. On my fear. On my isolation. What if I stopped being silent? I spent 3 days in that dark place. Barely eating, barely moving. Bethany tried to help, but what could she say? Every option seemed hopeless. Then, lying awake at 4 a.m., exhausted and empty, the fog in my mind cleared. Warren had spent weeks building a narrative: troubled stepdaughter, mental instability, theft, harassment. He'd invested enormous energy in making people see me as the problem. Why work so hard unless he was terrified of what might happen if they saw the truth? His entire strategy relied on me staying defensive, isolated, and silent. Every move he'd made was designed to keep me powerless. The theft accusation, the workplace sabotage, the restraining order. All of it was meant to ensure that if I ever tried to speak, nobody would listen. But what if I stopped defending myself and started simply telling the truth? Not loudly, not emotionally. Just calmly, factually, to anyone willing to listen. What if I stopped fighting his lies and started sharing my reality? I sat up, grabbed my laptop, and started making a new list. Not evidence this time. People. Everyone Warren had pushed away over the years. Everyone he'd marginalized or dismissed. Everyone who'd had strange interactions with him but stayed quiet because he seemed so respectable. I wasn't going to shout accusations. I was going to ask quiet questions and let the pattern reveal itself. Warren's power was built on silence. I was about to break it. I reached out carefully, one person at a time. Former neighbors. Warren's ex-colleagues. People who'd known him before Mom. Most ignored me. Some were hostile. But a few responded. Janet, Warren's former administrative assistant, met me for coffee. I reached out carefully, one person at a time. Former neighbors. Warren's ex-colleagues. People who'd known him before Mom. Most ignored me. Some were hostile. But a few responded. Janet, Warren's former administrative assistant, met me for coffee. She was hesitant, nervous, but she talked. He was always inappropriate, she said quietly. Comments about appearance. Standing too close. Nothing you could report exactly, but enough to make you uncomfortable. When I finally requested a transfer, he told everyone I was difficult to work with. Martin, a neighbor from Warren's previous house, shared similar stories. He borrowed $500 for a supposed emergency. Never paid it back. When I asked about it, he got defensive, said I was calling him a thief. Made me feel guilty for even bringing it up. Small stories. Individual incidents. But together, they formed a picture. Warren was a man who manipulated, who twisted situations to his advantage, who destroyed anyone who challenged him. I documented everything. Names, dates, patterns. Not for revenge, for truth. Meanwhile, I started quietly correcting false information. When someone repeated the theft accusation online, I calmly responded with the fact that no charges were ever filed because there was no evidence. When the harassment claim circulated, I posted screenshots proving I'd had zero contact with Warren. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just presented facts and let them stand. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, people started looking at the situation differently. The digital trail was damning once you knew where to look. I recovered deleted text messages between Warren and people he'd borrowed money from, promises of repayment that never materialized. I found social media posts he'd deleted, complaints from former associates he'd tried to bury. Most importantly, I found discrepancies in the police report. Warren claimed he'd discovered the money missing at 10 p.m., immediately after returning from dinner. But his credit card records showed purchases until 10:47 p.m. at a restaurant 20 minutes away. He couldn't have been home at 10. The timeline was impossible. I cross-referenced everything with phone records, GPS data from his fitness app, even weather reports that contradicted his statements. The theft accusation, the foundation of his entire attack on me, was built on provable lies. I compiled everything into a clear, chronological document. No emotional appeals. Just facts, timestamps, screenshots, and evidence. I saved multiple copies and sent them to a lawyer friend for review. "This is solid," she told me. "Really solid. If you wanted to pursue defamation charges, you'd have a case." But I wasn't interested in suing Warren. I wanted something simpler. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. I wanted his house of cards to collapse under the weight of his own lies. The question was timing. When to release this information for maximum impact, when people were finally ready to see past his performance. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. The family barbecue was scheduled for the last Saturday in June. Aunt Melissa's house, supposedly a healing gathering after recent tensions. Mom had made it clear I wasn't welcome. I showed up anyway. Not to cause a scene. Not to accuse. I simply arrived, brought a salad, and joined the family quietly. Warren saw me first. His face went white, then red, then carefully neutral. "Olivia," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Aunt Melissa invited everyone," I replied calmly. "I'm family too." The gathering grew tense. People watched us carefully. Warren positioned himself across the yard, playing the magnanimous victim, the man graciously tolerating my presence despite my betrayal. I spent the afternoon asking simple questions. Not accusations, questions. "Uncle Timothy, didn't Warren borrow money from you last year? Did he ever pay that back? Aunt Melissa, remember when Warren said he'd been at that conference in Denver? I saw photos from that weekend, weren't they from somewhere else?" Small inconsistencies. Gentle inquiries. Little cracks in the perfect image. People started shifting uncomfortably. Started thinking. Started remembering their own strange interactions with Warren that they'd dismissed at the time. I wasn't building a case. I was pointing at the one he'd built himself, showing them the foundation was rotten. Warren watched this happening, his jaw tight, his performance beginning to slip. It happened during dessert. Uncle Timothy asked Warren directly about the loan. "You said 3 months. It's been 13. Warren's expression flickered. I explained that. The investment took longer than expected. "What investment? You told me it was medical bills." That's not," Warren's voice rose. "I don't appreciate being interrogated at a family gathering." "I'm just asking about my money," Timothy said quietly. That's when Warren lost control. "You people," he hissed, his careful mask shattering. "You believe this disturbed girl over me? After everything I've done for this family? After I took her in, gave her a home?" "You married my mother," I said calmly. "You didn't take me in. I lived with my mother. You stole from me. You harassed me. You're standing here lying about me." "Warren," Mom touched his arm. "Let's just..." "No." He pulled away from her. "I'm done being the villain in this girl's delusions. She rejected my help, rejected my guidance, and when I tried to hold her accountable for theft, she invented this insane story about me making advances." The yard went silent. I hadn't mentioned the advances to anyone here. That detail hadn't been public. Warren realized his mistake immediately. His face went pale. From across the patio, I saw Aunt Melissa's teenage daughter raise her phone. She'd been recording the outburst. The truth had just spoken itself. The video was in the family group chat within an hour. Then it spread. 43 seconds of Warren losing control, contradicting himself, revealing information he shouldn't have known unless my insane story was actually true. His carefully constructed image crumbled in real time. People who'd dismissed me, who'd called me a liar, suddenly had questions. Why would Warren mention advances if they were invented? Why would he get so defensive so quickly? The video went beyond family. Warren's professional contacts saw it. His church group. His neighborhood association. Comments appeared under the video. "He did something similar to my sister years ago. I always felt uncomfortable around him." The theft charge was dropped. No evidence was ever found. Warren tried damage control, claiming he'd been baited, that I'd manipulated him into looking bad. But the harder he tried to explain, the worse it looked. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't comment on the video. I didn't gloat. I simply let his own words speak for themselves. 3 days later, I received a message from Mom. Just one line. "We need to talk." Not an apology. Not a full acknowledgement. But that single sentence represented a crack in her absolute certainty. Warren's greatest weapon, Her unquestioning loyalty was finally wavering. And he knew it. Mom and I met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. She looked exhausted, older somehow. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hands shook slightly as she held her cup. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said. Not an apology. Not full acceptance. But no longer the absolute rejection I'd faced for weeks. I watched that video 20 times. The way he reacted, the things he said. She paused. "He told me you invented that story. But you never mentioned it publicly. So how did he know to defend against it?" "Because it happened, Mom. Exactly like I'd tell you if you'd been willing to listen." She flinched. "He's been my husband for 3 years. I thought I knew him." "You know the version he shows you," I said carefully. "I know the version he showed me when nobody else was watching." We sat in painful silence. I wanted her to apologize, to admit she'd chosen wrong, to say she believed me. But I could see her struggling, fighting against months of Warren's manipulation. "I need time," she finally said. "I need to think." It wasn't what I wanted. But it was movement. It was doubt. And in Warren's carefully controlled world, doubt was devastating. When I returned to Bethany's apartment, I found 3 missed calls from unknown numbers and an email from Detective Phillips. The subject line read, "Follow-up investigation requested." Everything was shifting. The balance of power, the narrative, the truth. Warren felt it too. I could sense his panic in the way events were accelerating. This was far from over. I met with Detective Phillips on Tuesday morning. This time, I came prepared. I brought the audio files, the timeline discrepancies, the credit card receipts that contradicted Warren's police report. I brought Sophie's written statement about the incident 7 years ago. I brought statements from Janet and Martin about Warren's pattern of manipulation. I presented everything calmly, chronologically, without emotion. The theft accusation was demonstrably false, I explained. He claimed to be home at a time his own records prove he wasn't. He accused me of stealing money he likely never had. And he did all of this immediately after I rejected his inappropriate advances. Phillips reviewed the evidence carefully. His expression remained neutral, professional, but I saw the shift in his attention. "Why didn't you present this initially?" I was in shock. I'd just been accused of theft by someone my mother trusted completely. I didn't realize it was part of a larger pattern of manipulation until later. He made notes, asked questions, requested permission to verify certain details. 2 hours later, he said the words I'd been waiting for, "We're reopening the investigation." Not a vindication yet. Not a full exoneration. But official acknowledgement that something was wrong with Warren's story. I walked out of that police station feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The truth was finally, officially, being examined. That afternoon, Warren received notification that he needed to come in for additional questioning. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Warren's interview with police lasted 3 hours. I wasn't present, but Detective Phillips called me afterward with an update. "His story has significant inconsistencies," Phillips said carefully. "The timeline doesn't work. His financial records show patterns of borrowing and debt that make the theft accusation suspicious. And when questioned about the recording found in his cloud storage, he became defensive and contradictory." "What happens now?" "The theft charge against you is officially dismissed due to lack of evidence and timeline impossibility. We're now investigating whether Mr. Fletcher filed a false police report." The words washed over me like absolution. Officially cleared. The accusation that had destroyed my reputation, threatened my job, and torn apart my family, officially dismissed. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Warren had damaged more than my record. He'd damaged my life, my relationships, my sense of safety. A dismissed charge didn't repair that. "There's also," Phillips continued, "the matter of the other allegations. We've been contacted by 2 other women with similar stories about Mr. Fletcher. If you're willing to pursue harassment charges, you'd have supporting evidence." I thought about Sophie, about Janet, about everyone Warren had manipulated and silenced over the years. I need to think about it, I said. But yes, I'm willing. When I hung up, I sat in silence, processing. Warren was no longer the respected victim. He was the suspect. The liar. The man whose carefully built facade was publicly crumbling. Justice was slow. But it was coming. The voicemail arrived at 2:47 a.m. on Thursday. Warren's voice, slurred with alcohol or desperation. Olivia, you need to stop this. You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding. I never meant anything inappropriate. You misread the situation. If you don't drop these accusations, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I have resources. I have connections. You're nothing. You're nobody. This crusade of yours? It ends now, or I promise you'll regret it. The threat was clear. The desperation was obvious. And most importantly, he'd left it all recorded. I saved the voicemail immediately. Forwarded it to my lawyer friend. Sent a copy to Detective Phillips. The threatening tone, the attempted manipulation, the implicit acknowledgement that I'd been telling the truth all along, it was all there. This is gold, my lawyer friend texted. He's confessing and threatening you simultaneously. This is evidence of harassment, intimidation, and consciousness of guilt. Warren had finally made the mistake I'd been waiting for. In his panic, trying to control the narrative one last time, he'd exposed himself completely. I didn't respond to the voicemail. Didn't engage. I simply documented it and submitted it to the appropriate authorities. The next morning, Warren's lawyer called him with urgent news. The police wanted another interview, and this time, he should expect serious questions about harassment and witness intimidation. The man who'd tried to destroy my life with false accusations was now drowning in the consequences of his own lies. I submitted everything to the prosecutor's office. The audio recordings, the timeline evidence, witness statements from Sophie, Janet, and 2 other women who'd come forward. The threatening voicemail. The pattern of manipulation spanning years. I did it calmly, without theatrics. I didn't give press interviews or post on social media. I let the evidence speak for itself. The prosecutor's office moved forward with charges against Warren for filing a false police report and criminal harassment. Not the most severe charges possible, but charges nonetheless. Official consequences. Public accountability. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to see Warren destroyed. I wanted the truth to stand on its own, to be undeniable and documented. At work, Mr. Harrison called me into his office again. This time, his expression was apologetic. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. The false information we received about you. We should have investigated before issuing warnings. You were protecting the company, I said. I understand. No, I was lazy. I took the easy path instead of the right one. Your position here is secure, and if you want, we can discuss advancement opportunities. You've shown remarkable strength through this. Justice was arriving quietly but firmly. Not with explosions or dramatic confrontations. With simple truth, documented and undeniable, creating consequences that Warren couldn't manipulate away. The family reckoning happened gradually, then all at once. Aunt Melissa apologized first, calling me in tears. I should have believed you. I should have listened. Uncle Timothy sent a formal apology letter. I enabled his behavior by staying silent about the money he owed. I'm sorry. Others remained silent, not defending Warren, but not acknowledging their mistake either. Their silence was its own kind of admission. Mom was the hardest. We met again at that same coffee shop. This time, she cried. I chose him over you, she said. I chose believing a man I'd known 3 years over believing my own daughter. I don't know if you can forgive that. I looked at her. This woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, then abandoned me when I needed her most. I don't know either, I said honestly. Right now, I just need space. I need to heal from what he did and what you allowed to happen. I understand. She wiped her eyes. I filed for divorce yesterday. I should have done it weeks ago. It wasn't enough. It didn't erase the pain. But it was movement toward truth. toward acknowledgement. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something I owed her. It was something I might choose to give eventually, if she earned it through consistent action over time. But right now I needed distance and boundaries and time to rebuild what Warren had destroyed. Warren's fall accelerated rapidly. His employer placed him on administrative leave after the harassment charges became public. Within 2 weeks, he'd been quietly terminated, officially for budgetary reasons, but everyone knew the truth. His reputation in the community evaporated. The respected volunteer coach, the devoted husband, the victim of an ungrateful stepdaughter, all of it revealed as performance. People who'd defended him now avoided him. He lost the house in the divorce proceedings. Mom kept it, plus considerable settlement given his fraudulent financial behavior during the marriage. The false police report charge resulted in a misdemeanor conviction, community service, and a permanent record. Not prison time, but permanent consequences. Warren Fletcher would never again have the clean reputation he'd weaponized against others. I watched this unfold from a distance, feeling neither joy nor sadness. Just a quiet sense of completion. Warren's power had always been built on control. Controlling narratives, controlling other people's perceptions, controlling who was believed and who was dismissed. I'd simply refused to be controlled. I'd told the truth calmly and consistently, gathered evidence, connected witnesses, and let the pattern reveal itself. His downfall wasn't my revenge. It was simply the natural consequence of his own actions, finally exposed to light. The man who'd framed me to silence me could no longer hide behind manipulation. 3 months after the criminal case concluded, I was invited to speak at a local organization supporting survivors of family manipulation and abuse. I almost declined. Speaking publicly meant revisiting trauma, exposing vulnerability. But I thought about Sophie, about the other women who'd stayed silent, about everyone Warren had hurt who'd never found their voice. I accepted. The audience was small, maybe 40 people. Some survivors, some advocates, some people supporting loved ones. I stood at that microphone, my hands shaking, and told my story. Not for sympathy. Not to shame Warren. But to show others that silence wasn't the only option. I thought I was powerless, I said. I thought because he was older, respected, trusted, that his word would always matter more than mine. I thought rejecting him meant accepting destruction. But the truth is powerful. Evidence is powerful. Consistency is powerful. And refusing to accept someone else's narrative about who you are, that's powerful too. I talked about collecting evidence, finding allies, staying calm when everything in me wanted to scream. I talked about the long, slow process of truth revealing itself. When I finished, several people approached me with their own stories. Some were still in the middle of their battles. Some were just beginning to realize they deserved to fight back. One young woman, maybe 19, said, "You made me realize I'm not crazy. Thank you." That moment made everything worthwhile. I moved into my own apartment in September, a small one-bedroom with good light and no memories of Warren. Bethany helped me move, along with a few other friends who'd stood by me. Work had promoted me to senior account manager. My reputation was rebuilding, stronger now because it was based on truth instead of assumptions. I developed new boundaries, new standards for relationships. I'd learned the hard way that trust shouldn't be automatic, that speaking up mattered, that my voice had value even when people tried to silence it. Mom and I maintained careful contact. Coffee once a month. Slow, tentative steps toward rebuilding something that might eventually resemble trust. But I didn't live with her. Didn't depend on her. Didn't give her power to hurt me again. I chose my own family now. Bethany, who'd given me a place to stay when I had nothing. Sophie, who'd been brave enough to share her story. The survivors I'd met through speaking events, creating a network of people who understood. Warren existed somewhere in the background of my life, dealing with his own consequences. I heard through family that he'd moved to another state, trying to start over. Part of me hoped he'd changed. Most of me didn't care. My life was no longer about him or defined by what he'd done. It was mine again. And that was the real victory, not his downfall, but my freedom. On quiet evenings now, I sometimes replay everything that happened. Not obsessively, Not painfully. Just reflecting. The truth I've learned is this: rejecting Warren didn't destroy my life. It could have, if I'd accepted his narrative. If I'd stayed silent, let him win, allowed shame and fear to define me. But the actual destruction came from believing I had no voice. From accepting that powerful people couldn't be challenged. From thinking that truth didn't matter if someone louder told more convincing lies. What saved me wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice, though justice did eventually arrive. What saved me was refusing to be silenced. Gathering evidence. Finding allies. Telling my story calmly, consistently, until people couldn't ignore it anymore. I think about the girl I was in that kitchen, terrified and shaking, with Warren's calculated eyes watching me reject him. She had no idea what was coming. The accusations, the isolation, the systematic destruction of her reputation. But she also had no idea what she was capable of. The strength she'd find. The truth she'd uncover. The voice she'd claim. I wish I could tell her, this is going to be awful. But you're going to survive it. And when it's over, you'll be stronger, clearer, and free. That kitchen moment didn't destroy me. It revealed what I was made of. And what Warren learned, too late, was that some people refuse to stay silent. Some voices can't be buried. Some truths are too powerful to hide. I am one of those voices. This is one of those truths. And I'm not afraid anymore.